Hi everybody, happy Monday.
Happy Monday everyone. What do we got in store today?
Well, last week's video was the fish with the best personalities. Obviously you'll link that somewhere. This is a little different, little on the other side of the coin. Community fish that a little angry.
So we've got 5 fish that are typically sold. You go to PetSmart, Petco, the local fish stores, and they're often billed as community fish, but from our experience and from the experiences of others and from all the comments that we receive on the channel, these are 5 fish that surprisingly could really mess up a community tank. And these are all fish you should be very wary of, and at least be very cognizant of the fact that they're going to be a little bit more aggressive than your standard community fish.
Wary, not weary. You should be wary of them. And they're all a bunch of angry elves.
They are. Number 1.
Well, you can start. I started last week,
okay.
So please.
Number 1, and this is absolutely the biggest one on the list, so we're just going to start out with the most important one, and that is the red-tailed shark. You will often see the red-tailed shark for sale, like I said, at all the big box stores, in your local fish store, and they are awesome fish. And by the way, I also include the rainbow shark in this as well, and they're really cool. When they're smaller, they don't tend to be overly aggressive, and then something happens as they age. They get into those formative teenage years, which is usually about 6 months to a year after you purchase them. They start to grow in size and really start to exert their aggressiveness. This is a fish that really only fits into a semi-aggressive to aggressive fish tank. It has got no place in a community tank. Now I know with all of these fish there are going to be exceptions to the rule. We did a species profile on this fish, as with many of these fish we'll put down in the description below, but this is one, trust me, you're going to want to do your homework on this fish before you consider buying one.
Well, it is a shark.
It is a shark. Actually, it's not. It's more like a carp. So number 2.
The Gourami.
The Gourami. This
sure
is another
look cute.
one. They do.
They sure look pretty. But those little arms, they're kind of like punching. That's always what I think about them when they're swimming around. Like they're looking for trouble.
They don't actually punch with those little tentacles. But
like
this is another fish. Now, there are lots of different types of gouramis, all the way up from the giant gourami that you could measure in feet, down to the sparkling gourami, which is just like an inch or so.
My favorite.
What we're talking about here is mostly the standard gouramis, again, that you would find at a pet store. So the opalines, the blues, the golds. We have them in our fish room, but almost always in a semi-aggressive community tank because, again, when they get older, especially the males, they tend to get more aggressive. Even the dwarf gouramis can be pretty aggressive, and it's often a bad idea to keep more than one gourami in the same tank. Again, there will always be exceptions to these rules that we're talking about. But in our experience, and from what we've heard from a lot of our viewers, this is one of those fish that can certainly mess up your community tank. So just be careful, especially when you're dealing with the full-size gouramis, what type of tank you're putting them in.
Yeah, we had Kringle, if you remember, Kringle the honey gourami in with Sparkles the betta. They were best friends for a little short while, but then they were no longer, and Kringles had to move on.
Yes, he's in a 125 in a much happier place.
He's doing good.
Number 3. My turn? Number 3. This is another fish that, again, a lot of times it's very common in the pet stores and people bring them home and they don't realize they're a little bit more aggressive than they intended. And that is the tiger barb. This is a very common fish. As with many barbs, not all, but many, they can be a little bit fin nippy. So if you have any long fin fish like guppies or angelfish or bettas in your tank, adding tiger barbs may not be a great idea. The other interesting thing about tiger barbs is, at least from our personal perspective, we haven't had a lot of success keeping them unless you keep them in very large groups, i.e. like 15, 20 or more. What tends to happen over time is they tend to pick on one another until they whittle that community down to just a couple or maybe just one. Now, tiger barbs in a semi-aggressive community tank can be a really good option. In a somewhat aggressive community, that's fine. In larger tanks, they tend to do better. So the larger you go in a fish tank, the better they're going to be. But if you stick them in a 20-gallon and you do the standard, I'm going to keep 6 tiger barbs in my 20-gallon, that doesn't always work.
Number 4, near and dear to my heart, because it's one of the very first types of fish that he let me pick out. He said, yeah, pick out. And this one was approved. The Buenos Tetras.
Oh, the Buenos. I remember that day. We were at a pet store. and it was for our 75 gallon. And I wasn't overly concerned with the mix because we had a Gourami in there, the Buenos areas, and some other fish that were not 100% community. But you love these fish.
I did. They lived a long time too.
And you got 6 of them.
Did I?
I believe, yeah. And you got 6 of them. And over time, what happened is kind of like the tiger barbs. They, one by one, picked each other off.
I had 5, and then I had 4.
Yeah, and then you had like 1, and it lasted a very long time. But in addition to that, kind of like the tiger barbs, they do tend to fin up. They are a definitely a more aggressive sort of tetra. So not all tetras, the moral of the story here is not all tetras are the same. And so we often say, oh, if you want a great community fish that schools together, tetras. Just be careful, because the Buenos Aires tetra is one that stands out as being a little bit more aggressive.
Yep.
Number
5.
5. This is the last one for today's countdown, and that is the male swordtail. So male swordtails, what a lot of people don't appreciate is they can get pretty big. I've seen male swordtails get 4 inches just in the body alone.
Really? I had no idea.
And then the tail even further adds even more size. The male swordtail in the wrong environment can be a very aggressive fish. Not always. Again, there are always exceptions to this, what we're talking about here. Lots of people have had these fish and they work out okay. But the male swordtails in particular, when you put them in a community tank, sometimes they start to exercise their authority a little bit, and they can be a little bit more aggressive than what people generally want, especially if you've got them in with like guppies or platies. And so generally all the fish that we're talking about fish that don't fit well into your peaceful community tank. We're like, oh, look at, they're all getting along. They're all swimming.
Much sometimes.
And then you add these fish, like, what's going on? Everybody's hiding in a corner. Male swordtails can sometimes do that.
Huh, who knew? I didn't know.
So that was the top 5 aggressive, non-cichlid community fish.
Yeah, that may give you a really great surprise.
All right, everyone, so if you want more information about gouramis in particular, check out this video right here. If you want more information on a lot of the fish that we discussed, there will be species profiles in the description below. Hope you have a good day. Appreciate you being here.
See you later.